And Luke looks to the left, and there's another one. He goes, there's another buck right there, and he's not broke. And so he's just running. And then so I pop the door open, and I put my rifle up on the mirror, and they're whistling at him and everything to stop him. And there's an oak tree that's probably 3 foot wide. And he stops right before he gets behind that oak tree.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's up, folks? My name is Sam Thrash. I'm your Fall Obsession Podcast host for this week's episode. Our podcast is driven by our friends over at Ridge Rock Hunt Company, and I will talk more about them later on at the end of our episode today. I am on here with our guest this week, our Fall Obsession Production Director, Nick Powell. Welcome back, Nick.
Hey, it's always good to be back, Sam.
Always good to jump back on a podcast with you, man. I feel like I gotta calm down my intro almost, because last week Drew hosted his first podcast episode from the Midwest version of our podcast, and
Heck yeah.
he was so like calm and professional and soothing in his intro and everything. I was like, man, that sounds so good, so clean. Now I'm like, I gotta dial it down a little bit.
And I feel like that's just how Drew is. He's just cool, calm, and collected all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good thing we got going now. So if you're a new listener, I've hosted a majority of our podcasts over the past couple years that we've been doing this, and now we're kind of splitting it up a little bit in different areas of the country. Drew's our marketing director, and he's going to be hosting some podcasts in the Midwestern region with some guests relevant to there. We're still going to be doing the podcast, Nick and I down here with Southern guests and other guests across the country, but kind of splitting up the workload a little bit and adding some more diversity to our podcast network and everything. So every week you're going to have either myself or Drew on here, which is going to be pretty cool. So looking forward. He was texting me the other day about some guests he's getting lined up there. So we're going to have some good content coming from the Midwest. I'm excited. So
that's awesome.
But in the meantime, so we're back on here. We're back in Texas this week.
Heck yeah, we are.
Heck yeah, on our podcast. And to talk about, honestly, a really cool story, how it all transpired, relevant to you, Nick, because you got to check off a bucket list item, man.
For sure.
Every week we ask our guests, especially the first timers on the podcast, what are bucket list hunts that you want to do that you haven't gotten to do yet? And you got to do one.
I got one knocked out.
Yeah. So
I was very fortunate.
We're gonna dive in and we're gonna talk about that and learn about this incredible experience down here in Texas that you got to have. So I'm turning it over to you. Let's dive in and figure out how this opportunity came about.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start by saying that I'm pretty sure I've said on this podcast before that an axis deer hunt is number 2 on my bucket list. So with an elk hunt being the first, axis is number 2. And so this last weekend I was very fortunate enough to get an opportunity to harvest an axis for myself, a nice axis buck. And it came about with a group local to the town that we work in. Me and Sam are both firefighter paramedics in a town here in DFW, and this group is called the Therapeutic Recreation Group. Shout out to PJ and Robbie over there. But they basically, the way it works is they take military vets, first responders, law enforcement officers. They take those guys out and just give them an opportunity to get outdoors and unwind from the everyday stresses of the job that we do. So, and every outing that they take, they're fairly new, like maybe a couple years old. And so every outing that they do, at the end of it, they get a nomination from everybody there. And so I was fortunate enough to be nominated by a buddy of mine who we work with, who went to the last outing. And then this time we went out to a high fence ranch in Breckenridge, Texas, called the M5 Ranch. Shout out to Dr. Mack out there and everybody out there who helped us out and made that possible. But it was basically an all expenses paid trip to the M5 Ranch to harvest and access deer. And so we head out, and they told us it was going to be from this day to this day. And so PJ reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you available from this day to this day?" And I basically told him that if I wasn't, I was going to be. I was going to make this happen, because like we said before, this was a huge bucket list hunt for me. So
Yeah, I mean, you don't pass that up. You just don't.
exactly. And so and everything lined out perfectly for work. I didn't have anything going on that weekend with, family or friends or anything like that. Nothing planned. I did have to work, but I was able to get that day off somehow, because Sam knows that it's very difficult to get a day off where you don't have to pay it back at some point. But anyways, so we head out Friday. They do all the introductions, and we show up, and these guys have so many gifts and things for us, because there was me and four other guys, sorry, 5 total. And they have all kinds of gifts lined out for us. Shout out to Rob Heffley at Arkansas Sportsman, and up in Arkansas, he donated 5 rifles, and we were gifted a rifle each. And with a gun case, backpack, a range bag, and all on top of a free access hunt. And so it was really an incredible experience to be able to go out there and be able to harvest and access. And it really gave me a different perspective on high fence hunting, because I've never done it before. And so having limited experience doing that, it gave me an insight on what it's actually like to go and do that. So
yeah, and I really hope that people continue listening and didn't turn off the podcast when they heard high fence ranch, because there's this misconception, this predetermined notion in everybody's mind, I feel like, that high fence is just shooting fish in a barrel, and I'm not saying there's not places out there where that's the experience you had, but as we're about to find out, you had to hunt. Like I did. You had to hunt. So
absolutely.
I wanna debunk early on in the podcast the misconception of Texas high fence ranches, because a properly and very well managed high fence ranch is not necessarily shooting fish in a barrel. That high fence around the outside, especially of a piece of property that's big enough, is more to ensure that what you're trying to do in regards to managing your own population, managing your own herd, managing your own genetics, and what you're feeding, the animals you have, making sure that stays within your own means. You're not just trying to overpopulate the property in an effort to make it as easy as possible. You're trying to control the animals and the environment that you have when it comes to how those animals are maturing. And
absolutely,
high fence ranches, they keep animals from leaving, but just as much as they do that, they keep animals that you don't want in your property, genetics that you don't want in your property, from coming in. So it works both ways. So I wanted to address that pretty early on before people start thinking that you're just going out there for an easy weekend.
Yeah, and because it was everything but. And I'm glad you touched on that, Sam, because I had the same notion that probably some of our listeners do. Like, I had the same feeling of like, man, this is going to be really cool, and it's probably going to be easier than the everyday, low fence hunt. But boy, was I humbled, for sure. And I got to give it to M5. They do it the right way, because there's a way that you can, there's a process, and growing these deer and these exotics, to not only be what you want, but also be, not to where they're just coming up eating out of your hand. Right. There's a process in doing that, and M5 does it correctly. And so in an effort to not give too much information away, because I'm I don't want to downgrade their process and tell everybody if it's a secret or anything. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but just in case, I want to be safe and respect the process that they have over there. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but they have an awesome process that gives these deer. They really do care for the animals, and they really take care of them in a top-notch way. But they also, not only do they care for them in a top-notch way, but they also release them in a way that, like I said, they're not going to come eat out of your hand. They're still going to be wild and weary, and you have to, and it really changes the way you hunt. Like you can't just go sit in a blind and pick which one you want and then take an easy shot. Like you have to pay attention to your wind, pay attention to your scent. You really have to get there at the right time. And even if there is a bunch of deer that come to the feeder, like we had, so I guess I'll just dive into my experience because it was really neat. So the first night we basically just got to the ranch, got to know everybody, and hung out that night. It was Friday night. So Saturday was going to be our hunt day. And then Sunday we were going to eat breakfast and head out that morning. And I don't know if any of our listeners have ever hunted axis. I'm sure there are some out there who have, but they are super skittish animals, like whitetail times 2. Like they're not an easy animal to hunt. And there were several people who worked there and were around them all the time said that they were one of the hardest animals out there that they have, that they're the hardest animals to hunt. So, and so getting 5 axis in a 24 to 36 hour period is not an easy task.
Yeah.
So day 2, Saturday morning, we all went and sat out in different blinds with our guides, and there was only 2 or 3 of us who actually saw any axis that morning. And so the blind that I sat in, we saw they have some black Hawaiian sheep out there. They have a bunch of different kinds of sheep, axis deer, aoudad. They just got some elk recently, if anybody's interested in an elk hunt. What else do they have? Whitetail, obviously. And then I feel like I'm missing something. They have wildebeest,
Black buck and oryx too, right?
black buck, and oryx. Yeah, that's what I was missing. So Saturday morning, we all sit in our blinds, and there's only a few of us who saw any axis. The blind that I sat in, we had some black Hawaiian sheep come in. We had several whitetail come in. One big, like 170, 180 inch whitetail who was probably a 1 or 2 year old, which
Holy cow.
is just crazy to think about. I mean, they have 2-year-olds who are 200 plus inches easy. And so,
ridiculous.
we didn't see anything that morning. And so throughout the day, we just basically drive around, and we can throw a picture up if we're planning on putting this on YouTube. We can throw a picture up of the Humvee that M5 has. We rode around in that quite a bit. They have a Humvee with a big hunting rack on top. It's freaking the baddest vehicle I've ever hunted out of. But we basically drove around in that during the day. So that morning we drove around, and around lunchtime they realized, hey, these axis are going to be more difficult than we had anticipated. And that's the owners of the ranch saying that.
Wow.
So around lunchtime we had gotten the go-ahead to kill. If we couldn't get an axis, we got the go-ahead to kill an aoudad, an oryx, a sheep, like the black Hawaiian, Corsican, Mouflon sheep that they had out there, and any axis. Those were our options. And this might have been a little bit after lunchtime. And so the group that I was with, we had come across this. They call it the Savannah, and it's just an area of their ranch that's like an African savanna, basically. And we saw some oryx going by there, and it was like a last-minute decision of, hey, we got the go-ahead for y'all to kill one of these. Do one of you want one of these instead of the axis? And they were probably 200 yards in front of us, and they were going to cross right in front of us. It was all set up pretty perfectly. Not set up. It all happened pretty perfectly. And so these oryx come out, And PJ, the guy who runs Therapeutic Recreation Group, was like, man, I've killed one of these before. They are really good eating. It's a lot of meat. And like at this point, I realized that the axis were going to be really difficult to hunt, and I had an opportunity right in front of me. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'll take one of these. And so they hopped out, gave me the shooting sticks. I got set up on the shooting sticks, and there was one big bull in this herd of oryx. And he was, when I say big, like a horse running across a field. I mean, just massive. And for those of y'all who don't know what an oryx looks like, just Google scimitar horned oryx, and that's what they have running around, basically, for the listeners who don't know. But this bull had like massive horns that came all the way back, like almost scratched his hind end. I mean, just a huge animal. And so me, being the blue collar, like hunt whitetail my whole life, never had an opportunity to shoot anything else, basically, I was amped, like buck fever times 10. And so I hop out of the Humvee, go get the shooting sticks, get set up on this dude. And I mean, they're going perfectly broadside. My rifle zeroed at 100. And so, and this is a rifle that I've never shot before, so I'm not blaming it on the rifle. The rifle was on point. It was definitely me not being experienced with that weapon. So, all in all, to say, I got set up, got on this dude, and being unfamiliar with it, I jerked the trigger a little bit, and I missed. It was a clean miss. They weren't running. It was not anything that the gun did. It was all on me. But I had missed this animal super easy. Like, he was staring at me. I pulled the trigger, shot, and he just kept staring at me, and then just trotted off real slow. So it wasn't like he wasn't injured at all. There was no sign of any injury whatsoever. And we went and checked for blood just in case, big animal, and there was no sign of anything. So after that, we drive around, see if we could find him again, see if we can find any access. We drive around, whatever. And there's only one guy at this point who had killed anything. And this was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so on our hunt day, like, we're all supposed to kill axis on this one day. Yeah. And there's only one person that's killed one. That's how difficult these animals are. And so
how are you feeling at this point?
It's like the pressure's on, like, big time. And I'm really hoping for some luck in the evening hunt. And so we go back to the lodge, which is phenomenal, by the way. Like, they have a single lodge with, I don't know, it'll probably sleep 20 people. And then they have individual cabins right next to the lodge. And so it's like, I think they have 3 or 4 individual cabins, which are awesome as well. Like, this place, if you guys are looking for a hunt and you don't mind hunting high fence, it doesn't have to be low fence or whatever, go check out M5 Ranch, because they will take care of you. Like, the food was top notch, the service was top notch, and I think I could have gone in a set of clothes, and they would have even had spare clothes for me to put on, like hunting clothes to put on, and had extra toothbrushes, whatever we needed. Like, it was incredible customer service, top tier folks over there. So go check them out. But it's getting like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One person's killed. One guy shot one, but he couldn't find it. Right when he squeezed the trigger, it moved and knocked it down, got back up, ran off. So they knew it was injured because we had found it later on, and we had seen it, and we confirmed that it was hit. But they had found that later that evening. And so that makes 2 guys that had killed, and then one guy killed a fallow. He was able to harvest a fallow. And so 3 out of the 5 of us had killed something. And so that night came, the evening hunt came, and we go sit in our blinds, whatever. Neither of us see anything. And I'm bow hunting the whole time when we hunt out of blinds. And so we're like right there next to the feeder. And so I think that might have been what hindered me in the long run, because I think something with the wind wasn't right, but they were super aware that we were there and just never came in, really. We never saw hardly anything. The whitetail are abundant out there, and so they came up in droves. There were several whitetail under the feeder, but just nothing that I was able to harvest, nothing I've been given the green light on.
Yeah.
So we go back empty-handed that night, and I'm thinking, like, because there had been some talk of, like, well, maybe they can hunt Sunday morning, but the guys that we were there with were like, no, if y'all don't get something tonight, that's it, kind of deal. And so we were like, okay, which I wasn't going to complain, because regardless of whether I had harvested something or not, it had been a phenomenal trip, and those people, like, they take such good care of you that was worth it in itself. So that night comes, we all go back and we're checking out, everybody's animals that they had killed that day. And, just looking at them up close was something that, like, I never expected. I never expected them to be so big.
Yeah.
Because I would compare them. I think we're just used to whitetail, the southern whitetail, who are kind of smaller in stature. Even the bucks. I mean, there's some big bucks here in North Texas, but they're just not that big. I would compare them closer to, like, a northern whitetail, maybe up like Ohio, Iowa area.
Yeah.
Just bigger bodied, really.
I was gonna say, like, you get up into the northern region, up into Canada, places like that, the whitetail are considerably bigger in body size, and I agree with that. An axis is like a whitetail on steroids when it comes to body size,
Exactly. And from what I hear, they're phenomenal eating, so I'm looking forward to that. And obviously everybody knows the end of the story, but we'll get there. So anyways, we get ready for dinner, and the sun didn't set till like 8:30, and so it's like 9-10 o'clock at night, and we're eating dinner, which was awesome, by the way. And the guys who are out there with us, our hosts, are like, hey, do you guys want to hunt in the morning if they offer that? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I do, and so this is once in a lifetime, I might not get this opportunity again. And so they're like, yeah, absolutely. Or I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And so they have a conversation, and apparently the owners of the ranch are like, yeah, we figured y'all were going to do that anyways. Like, we were expecting y'all to hunt tomorrow morning. So it all worked out. They were gracious enough to let us stay and hunt that next morning. And so going into Sunday morning, I had my mind set on an oryx, a scimitar horned oryx. Like, that was what I was going to kill. And so right now, as it stood Saturday night, 2 axis and 1 fallow had been down. The guy that I was hunting with Sunday morning also wanted an axis. So I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll take an oryx. The oryx are more of a herd animal, so they don't necessarily come into the feeder. They go out into the fields and graze as a herd. So sitting at the feeder, I wasn't expecting an oryx to come up, but we were in that area. So that Sunday morning, we were sitting in the bow blind, and we had on our way walking to the blind, we had a pig. We had spooked a pig, just a little, probably 75-pound pig, nothing too crazy. And he wasn't in any hurry to leave, I don't think, because he just kind of trotted off. And we got in there, and the feeder went off, and it wasn't 20 seconds later that pig was trotting up to this feeder. And so we have a pig at the feeder, and they were like, pigs are a free game. I feel like pigs are always kind of free game, because they're, they can get out of control pretty easy. So I make the decision that I'm gonna shoot this pig. Well, my arrow stash or cache is not very abundant, so I had 2 arrows total, and I have more than that, but I only have 2 broadheads. So
we can fix that.
I know, and I need to. And that was my plan. I planned on doing that this year, and I still need to get on that before September, October gets here. But anyways, that's another conversation.
Yeah, another talk.
But anyways, so I had my arrow that I wanted to kill big game with, and then I had an arrow that I didn't really care about. So I had to switch my arrows, and as I'm switching my arrows, 3 more pigs about the same size come up. And so there's 4 pigs standing around the feeder. Because the guide's like, hey, you can shoot that pig or you can wait and see if something else comes in. So I wanted to shoot something, so I decided to shoot that pig. So I'm switching my arrow out. Those 3 pigs come up, and I get ready to draw back, and then another one comes up. I'm like, oh, I need to range him. So I go and range him, range the one I want. And as I put my rangefinder down, the last one that came up, you could tell he was kind of the ringleader. Mm-hmm. He gave one big, snort, and all 5 of them jokers took off.
Really?
Yeah. And so I don't know if maybe he was onto something that they weren't aware of, or maybe he saw me move. I'm not real sure, but all 5 of them jokers took off.
Was your wind swirling at all?
There wasn't any wind.
No wind.
So that's kind of what we think, was that it was just kind of stagnant down there.
Yeah.
And that our scent was just kind of hovering a little bit. But anyways, my guide Nate, he was like, hey, there's an axis buck coming right now. So his axis starts coming to the feeder, and I never even see him. And he's like, oh, because now I have to switch my arrows back, right? Because I have my hog arrow in. So now I have to switch my arrows back. He says there's an axis coming, so I'm trying to switch them, be quiet, And I'm going to get my arrow in. He's like, oh, he took off. And then after that was all we saw that morning. And so they told us, they were like, hey, if nothing comes in pretty quick after the feeder spins, we'll come pick you up and we'll drive around and find you something.
Yeah.
I'm like, fantastic, let's do that. So they come pick us up. And it was really cool because it was really a team effort. I would say, like the guy who shot his axis and lost it, there was so many people out there trying to help him find it, and they walked through hundreds of yards of woods and mesquites and stuff to find this deer, and they ended up doing that. And so the three guys that had killed Saturday, while I was in the blind, they were out driving around looking for oryx for when, just in case nothing happened that morning at the feeder. And so when they came and picked us up, they were like, hey, by the way, we found the oryx. And so we're like, here we go. Now's our chance, So we go and we go find the oryx, and we get on. We find one. It was a female. She was all by herself, and she might not have been, but she was the only one we saw. And so we find this female, and we keep driving around, and then we don't see anything. And so we hear that the other guy, there's another guy that hadn't killed. And so he had shot an axis that morning. And so we were going to meet up with them. And we meet up with them, and they're like, hey, we saw one lone bull. We saw a group of oryx with a big bull, and then we saw one lone bull up over here. And so we're like, perfect. So me and my guide hop in with the owner of the ranch, and we drive around, and Robbie was with us too, who's with TRG. And so we go to that one lone bull, and we find him, and they're like, hey, he's got one broke horn on the left side. And I'm like, at this point, I don't care, I'll shoot him. And so they're like, okay, great. And so we find him, we get on him, and then he just starts walking away. As I put my crosshairs on him, he starts walking away, directly away from us, so I don't have a good shot. And then we're like, hey, if we back out and go back around this road, we'll hit this tank that's on the right side of the road. Y'all can go down in this tank, because all the water was really low out there because of the drought we're having this year. Mm-hmm. And so we get to this tank, and they're like, once you get over that dam on the other side, that oryx should be walking right towards you. You'll have an awesome shot, right? And so we get to this tank, me and the guy jump out, and the guy at this time was Luke. He's the owner's son, Luke Mack. And we get out, we go across this tank, go up this tank dam, and we're walking really slow, really quiet, and we're just kind of peeking over the tank dam. And we're looking in the direction that this oryx should be coming from, and we're scanning. We got the binos out, and we're scanning, we're glassing We don't see anything. And then all of a sudden back at the truck, Andy, the owner of the ranch, is like, Luke, he's right there. He's right there. And like 20 yards to our left. So we're looking to the right, and 20 or 30 yards to our left, he's down the tank dam, and he's walking away from us.
Oh, man.
And so he had just passed where we were going to ambush him at, basically. He had just passed it.
Oh, man.
And so we get on him, and I get my crosshairs on him, and they just start whistling. They're like, hey, look over here. And so he kind of turns his head, and he ain't worried about nothing, really. And so he kind of turns and looks, and he's quartered real hard away from us. And then as soon as I'm getting ready, because like I have kind of a shot, and I'm like, this might be my only opportunity, but I didn't want to rush it again because that happened the day before.
Right.
And so I get on him, and I'm just waiting. And then he gets behind a tree and just keeps walking away. Just keeps walking. They're like, come back, well, he's going to cross the road and we'll catch him up there. So we sprint back to the truck and hop in the truck, and we drive real slow up to where he's at, where he crossed the road. And now, like, I don't know how this dude never went faster than a walk, but he could cover some ground. I don't know how he did it so fast, but that dude could cover some ground because he was already 100 yards on the other side of the road.
Word.
I mean, he's moving, but he's not.
He's walking, but he's moving. Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. But I guess that's what, like, out in Africa, that's what they do. That's all they do is just walk. And so that's what they're built for. And so we find him again after he crosses the road, and Andy's like, hey, I think if you go around, we'll be able to cut him off. And Luke's like, I think we can just walk after him. And I'm like, I don't care what we do. Y'all just tell me what to do.
Tell me what to do, yeah.
And so he's like, I think we can walk after him and catch him. And so we hop out of the truck and we start barreling off into the woods. And we're following him, and we can see him, and we never really lose sight of him. Like, we'll lose him, and then we'll find him. We'll lose him, and then we'll find him. We follow him probably 200-300 yards, and then we lose him. We get to a road, and we're like, I have no idea where he went. And so then he calls Andy, and Andy brings the truck around, picks us up. And so then we're circling the entire quadrant that this orc's where we think he should be. So we come around, and as we come around, Andy goes, hey, there's some axis right there. There's a buck that runs out, and then like 6 or 7 does that follow him, and they're at a full sprint. Like, if our truck is straight and we're using the clock method, so 12 o'clock is on, 6 o'clock's in the back.
Yeah.
These axis are running from probably 10 or 11 o'clock, and they're running towards 12 o'clock. So they're running from left to right.
Right.
And he's like, oh, that's the broke one that we saw, yesterday. We're like, oh, okay. And Luke looks to the left, and there's another one. He goes, there's another buck right there, and he's not broke. And so he's just running. And then so I pop the door open, and I put my rifle up on the mirror, and they're whistling at him and everything to stop him. And there's an oak tree that's probably 3 foot wide. And he stops right before he gets behind that oak tree. And he's probably 5 or 6 feet behind it. He stops right before he gets to that oak tree. And like, all I can see is probably about half neck and back. So I can see his entire body. And so I put that crosshair right behind his shoulder. And this time I squeezed the trigger how it's supposed to be squeezed. And he did the old donkey kick and took off.
Nice.
Took off into the thick trees. And so we were like, okay, he's hit for sure. And so we wait there probably 10, 15 minutes, and we see the rest of them. There's a road off to probably our 3 o'clock. And we see the rest of them cross that road, the broke buck, and then the does, and the one that I shot never crossed that road. So we're like, okay, he's in those trees somewhere. And so we wait 10, 15 minutes, and we go start looking for blood. And we find just like a drop of blood here, drop of blood there, drop of blood there. And so we're like, oh, great. Like, this is we're going to be a while. And so they start getting more consistent. And then Luke grabs me and he said, hey, look right up there. And my axis is laying there stone cold dead, right about 50 yards from where we shot him. And I could not explain. I can't put into words the excitement I felt seeing that axis lay there, it was just like down to the wire. And usually, like, I don't consider myself a very lucky guy, but so like when it comes down to the wire like that, especially after last season, I know everybody's heard the story from last season.
Yeah.
Especially after that, man, I have not had the best track record, but seeing that axis laid there, it's just like a weight lifted off my shoulders, and then for multiple reasons, and then two, it was like I finally did it. Like I finally was able to, something worked out, you know, because it was just like the whole trip driving around, I was sitting on the driver's side because I'm right-handed, and it was just like every axis we saw was on the passenger side, and like nothing ever came into the feeders that I sat at, and so it was just like the opportunity was never there, you know. And so for this dude to stop, and he was the only one in the whole herd that stopped. The rest of them never even looked twice, you know. And so he was the only one to stop. He stopped long enough for me to get a shot off. Like everything worked out perfectly, and I got to give it to those guys, for Robbie and Andy and Luke, for sticking with me till literally the last second, because like breakfast was ready, and so we loaded them up, got all of our pictures, loaded them up, and went and ate breakfast, and it was just freaking awesome, man. Awesome.
That's incredible, man. A bucket list hunt for sure that you get to check off the list. That's an incredible experience for sure. One you won't forget.
Yeah, and luckily I get to have them on the wall. Shout out to Thomas and Jonathan Ivy with Crane Works in Kilgore, Texas. They took care of taxidermy for all of the hunters, which is undescribable, like unbelievable. I can't thank those guys enough. And then everybody at M5 and then TRG. So can't say thank you enough, and I feel like that's all I've said. But can't thank those guys enough.
It's genuine, man. Like you mentioned at the beginning what TRG is trying to do, and you know, getting these vets and first responders and everybody out, and you know, you don't want to look at it from a perspective of, oh, I get to go on a free hunt. You know, I feel like because my driver at work was another one of the guys that got to go with you.
Yes.
And so I was actually last shift. I was sitting at the kitchen table, you know, one of those late night firehouse talks, and he was telling me all about it, you know, and his experience. And he's a guy who has never, like, he used to hunt, you know, back when he lived out west and everything. He'd hunt elk and stuff every year growing up, but he's never really hunted in Texas since he's lived here. And you know, he was telling me about the experience. He's like, man, I showed up and I felt cared for, like from the very second I stepped out of my vehicle, and you know, that speaks volumes. Your story speaks volumes, you know, that they truly care about the guys that they're taking out there, and they genuinely want it to be a stress-free, you know, experience. Now you have stress in that you're trying to kill an animal, you know, down to the wire. They can't really help that, you know, but they're doing everything they can to take everything off these folks' plates and just have it be an enjoyable, relaxing, decompress weekend, you know, for everybody.
Yes, and it felt like, and me and your driver, we talked in as well as one other guy who went with us, one other firefighter who went with us, and we all were like, man, it's just weird, because in our profession, we're so used to taking care of other people and not always being taken care of ourselves. And so it was just weird at first.
Yeah. It's not in our blood. It's not, you know?
Yeah. And so like we're protectors, we're providers, and that's what we do. We're servants basically.
Yeah.
And it was just so strange at first to get out of that and be like, okay, well, now somebody's repaying this favor. And something that I always say is like, and I've talked with several people about this, but it's like we never have an issue when someone asks us for help. Like we're always willing to help somebody, but when it's time for us to ask for the help, we don't. And so on top of that, like I feel like being a Christian, I know it's kind of random, but being a Christian, like that's what God put us here for. He put us here to help each other and be with each other and to be there for each other. And so for those guys to do that for not just me and these guys that went on this hunt, but several people who they've taken out on different types of adventures have really helped. And I don't think I mentioned it in the beginning, but their whole point is to prevent suicide and military first responder folks. And so a way to do that is to get them outdoors and just kind of unwind and decompress from the everyday stresses. So
Yeah.
big shout out to those guys. And
Yeah.
if anybody is out there who wants to support what they're doing, I can contact me, email me. We can message me on Facebook, try and get a hold of me somehow, and I can get you in touch with those guys if y'all want to support. So
Yeah, message Fall Obsession, send us an email,
Yeah.
go through the website contact form, and we'll put you in touch with Nick, and he can be the point on that one. So
for sure.
yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on, and I don't think I mentioned it on the podcast. I know I mentioned it to you. We actually, in the future, we want to find a time to actually get these guys from TRG, Therapeutic Recreation Group, on our podcast to talk more about what they do and kind of the more ins and outs of everything. Because it's not just hunting trips like this. Like they've done, Colorado hiking trips, fishing trips, a bunch of other types of stuff that, and they're trying to focus really on our area. I know there's tons of groups out there that do this kind of thing, or a variation of it, for military, first responders, etc. But they're pretty. My understanding is they're pretty focused here in our North Texas area that we're in. So we're very, very grateful to have them around here, and like I said, we'll do our best to try and at some point in the future get them on our podcast. Because they're local, maybe we can actually make an in-person episode. So that'd be pretty neat.
I bet we can. I bet we can make that happen pretty easy.
Yeah, we'll start working on that. But man, so I wanted to ask you, because as you mentioned at the beginning, this was number 2 on your bucket list. So a big one checked off right there. What's taking its place? What's next? I know the elk hunt's number 1, but what's next?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with muleys.
Nice.
Big muley. It doesn't matter where. It can be wherever.
I'm right there with you. Let's make it happen one of these days.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right, man. Well, anything else you wanna hit or touch on about this experience, about this axis hunt?
No, that was pretty much it. I could go on and on about how well they treated us, but I think I'd just be beating a dead horse at this point, because I think I've made it pretty clear how well they cared for us and how well they'll care for anybody who goes out there. That's just
awesome.
the kind of people they are.
Yeah.
So
Awesome to hear, for sure. So, well, and kind of on a sidebar, it's kind of cool that this summer we got a little bit of axis deer content on our podcast, because Drew got to go on one a couple months ago as well, and we recently recorded a podcast with him about that. So that was it's pretty neat that we kind of sandwiching those together here, and
yeah, for sure.
Gonna just another thing that we're able to talk about and provide some insight on. So
Yeah, just one more tool in the toolbox.
Tool in the toolbox, absolutely. All right, for our listeners, thank you all for listening. If you haven't already, go to your social media account, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it might be, and go follow Fall Obsession. We post daily on there, content relevant to hunting in the outdoors. We cover hundreds of different topics in the outdoors, and we try to put stuff on there that's relevant to you guys wherever you hunt. On that note, our website includes all that content. That's fallobsession.com, where you can find all of our video series, our podcasts, our educational content, whether it be videos or articles, our gear reviews, our wild game recipes. We got all sorts of different stuff on there for you guys, so be sure that you go check that out. Head on over to the YouTube channel, subscribe to that, because we got a lot of different video series running right now, including our Texas Dirt series, which is Nick and I doing some whitetail management on the property we're on out here in Texas. So pretty cool what we got going on there. As far as our podcast goes, be sure you follow and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. We're on all major podcast platforms, as well as Waypoint TV, and our podcast videos we throw up on our YouTube channel. So if you're into the podcast video thing and you actually want to watch the conversation, see our faces, see our emotions, you can head on over there. And then I think this is the first time any of our platforms are ever going to mention it, but as I told you before we recorded, I'm pretty excited about a new opportunity we got coming on. But Fall Obsession podcast, as well as some of our media series, are also about to be on Carbon TV, which I'm sure a majority of people are probably familiar with the network that Carbon TV has going on. So we're super excited to be opening up that avenue with them, and more info to come on that as we prepare for launch with them over there at Carbon TV. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company's the podcast partner. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they do a fantastic job setting up a network of vetted and trusted outfitters across North America. So if you're looking for your next hunt, whatever it might be, wherever it might be, contact Derek. Nick's rocking the hat right there on the podcast episode right now. So, and they got some pretty sweet lids. Derek posted a new one the other day that's pretty sharp. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to get that one.
Yeah, head on over, support their brand, pick you up some merch, and if you're looking for a hunt coming up, give Derek a call. He will work with you to find something that works in your budget, even if it's 2-3 years out. You know, a hunt that you're trying to save up some preference or bonus points for, however all that works, wherever you're trying to hunt and make happen in the future. He'll help you figure out a plan to go with an outfitter in future seasons on your dream hunt, basically. So head on over and check out Ridge Rock Hunt Company.
Yeah, and Sam, if I can add something onto that.
Please do.
Go get some of their merch, because I was wearing this hat when I killed that axis. So,
man, you've been rolling with that hat because you shot a pig with it, I think, the weekend before.
Weekend before, yeah.
So yeah, those Ridge Rock hats, man, they're good luck charms if you're superstitious at all. So
for sure,
go get you one. I wear mine all the time. Actually, before we recorded, when we first got on here, Nick was giving me a hard time about not wearing mine in this podcast episode. So I gotta actually rep Fall Obsession every once in a while. But all right, guys, thank y'all for listening to another podcast. Next week, it might be me, it might be Drew. You'll have to wait and see, but we'll catch you then for another Fall Obsession podcast episode.
Catch you later.